Welcome back to the Magnolia Media Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan M. Ruggiero. First of all, I want to send a shout out to all my friends on Instagram who have been joining me for our lives. I hope that has led you to our podcast, which I try to promote on Instagram and on Threads as often as possible. A little bit on YouTube, but mostly on those two platforms. And as we dive into the politics of the day, I just want to put out a big shout out for those of you who posted comments about Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, the last film I believe we all agreed on seeing together the other night as the movie of the night. I know at least a handful of you sat down and watched it and had good things to say about it. Now, it's a little fantastical and it's a little out there. Yes, it's a little this, a little that, but I think it was one of the finer performances by Robert Downey Jr. and was sort of, his return to the A-list in Hollywood, as Val Kilmer was fantastic in that film, along with Larry Miller, Michelle Monaghan, and a handful of other notable stars. So, anyway, let's jump right into it. As President Biden endorses reforms to the Supreme Court of the United States, he wants them to limit immunity for presidents of the United States. Basically, he wants them to reconsider making a president of the United States an effing king. He wants 18-year term limits. Now, this is something that more than half the country supports. The idea that every president, every couple of years, will get to appoint a Supreme Court justice. This also takes away the lifetime rule so that these people can be held accountable for the awful and illegal things they have done to the American public. It's not like we're waiting for them to do awful things. Look at the awful things done by Clarence Thomas, including going to vacation with Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg in a palace on a mega yacht, and then a helicopter ride for free to St. Petersburg to the aforementioned palace, because, of course, Putin is more or less held up in Russia as he really can't go anywhere else. Also, a proposed constitutional amendment to end the Supreme Court of the United States anti-democratic rulings on presidential immunity, which is, let's frankly, that one's not going to happen. And a major shift, in Biden's opinion, on the court came when the Supreme Court of the United States seemingly overreached by ending race as a consideration for college admissions, a 40-year-old precedent, overturning of Roe after all 6 justices who voted to end Roe lied to the United States Senate during their confirmation hearings. So they're liars, they're thieves, they've told us one thing and done another, time and time and time again, and they've forgotten to disclose it. But it doesn't matter because there's no binding code of ethics for a Supreme Court justice, so they just do whatever they want. I think, just my humble opinion, we should just do away with the Supreme Court and move to the what they call the miniature Supreme Court already in Washington, D.C., the D.C. Court of Appeals, sort of the junior Supreme Court, if you will. And let's see, all of this it was written in a scathing op-ed by President Biden in the Washington Post. Biden mentioned he had overseen the hearings for more Supreme Court nominees than anyone alive and wishes to preserve the court's credibility. Well, it's a little late for that, but, maybe, perhaps, I don't know, we could preserve their credibility by just dissolving the court altogether if we don't expand the court. And as much as I respect the people who helped him come to these conclusions, they are fanciful, to say the least. The real answer comes in the killing of the filibuster, getting away from this 60-vote threshold if Democrats hold on to the Senate, and they must hold on to the White House, and instead just appointing 6 new liberal justices, or center-right justices, or maybe 3 center-right and 3 center-left, or 3 whatever. Real conservatives, not these cosplay pro wrestling wannabe conservatives. I mean, it has gotten weird over in MAGA land. The reforms are aspirational, and the proposals would fall into the GQP-controlled House of Representatives. They're not the Grand Old Party anymore. They're the Grand QAnon Party these days. So we have to be sure and use the right initials. The QAnon, the QAnon people, the QAnon flags, January 6th people, yeah, okay, and the choir, yeah, all right. So they sing the January 6th choir song instead of the national anthem. They've sort of laid those tracks over each other. Forgive me for not memorizing it, as it was not part of history class or civics when I was growing up. Not something we needed to remember. So those reforms would die in the House of Representatives. The other option would be to get 2/3 of states to ratify it. 2/3 of states and their legislatures are never going to ratify a constitutional amendment limiting the power of the Supreme Court of the United States. And I appreciate Dr. Lawrence Tribe of Harvard for working with President Biden on 2 important phone calls to help put this together. As we've seen, Thomas and Alito have led Biden to promote an ethics code, one with teeth. Thomas has lied, not recused himself, and has taken millions in gifts from billionaires who have had business before the Supreme Court again and again. He refused to recuse himself. Ending lifetime appointments to the Supreme Court would rid America of this legal oligarchy and put these attorneys back out into a world where they'd make millions and millions of dollars. So they wouldn't have to worry about taking it from, pro-Putin super PACs. Let's see. Secretive billionaire Leonard Leo was outed by one of the finest podcast/radio shows in America, produced by WNYC, called On the Media with Brooke Gladstone and Michael Lowinger, when they did a 3-part series about Leonard Leo, a man who really wanted to fly under the radar but had done more to shape and destroy the Supreme Court of the United States than really anyone else alive over the course of the last 20 or 30 years. In other words, don't say Leonard. But Leonard Leo has decided he'd go extreme. He wanted every Supreme Court justice ever, on both sides, who did anything, ever, at any time, at any point, took any money, any gift, anything, ever, signed a meal, anything, a baseball card. He wants them all held accountable for all of it. He looks at it as liberals just wanting to attack an institution which they lost control. Well, no, not exactly. You see, Russia elected a man president of the United States, or at least ran an influence campaign through a company called Cambridge Analytica. Let me walk you through this, Leonard, in case you need to be walked through it again. Although we know you know all about it because you're the slime ball that helped make it happen. A quote, friend of the extreme right-wing thugs who are trying to turn America into a theocracy, one that doesn't believe in helping young people after it struck down Biden's plan to forgive student loans of millions of Americans, which he 100% has the power to do as ultimately the head of the Department of Education, which writes most of those loans. He doesn't need the Supreme Court's approval for everything, including every time he takes a leak, even if it takes a very long time because he is a very old man. Anyway, but one that doesn't believe in helping young people, unless, of course, those young people are rich, because they truly believe, and this is really true with Clarence Thomas, and he's made it clear, made it on several occasions, that he believes rich people, people with not millions but billions of dollars, are simply more important than average Americans. This court will have to be expanded by the next Democratic president, likely Kamala. At least we can hope it's Kamala. And speaking of presidential politics for a moment, let's talk about J.D. Vance, if that's his real name. Or at least it's one of 3 names he's used, having his legal name changed 3 times. First, he was James David Hamill, or at least at some point, that was the name he used while he was in the United States Marine Corps. And not because he was trying to hide some sort of privilege. Because, according to him, he is, after all, a hillbilly. Of course he's not a hillbilly. Then there was James Donald Bowman. Donald! 2 Donalds on the same ticket! Oh my God! That must be where he gets the, Donald Trump-like influence, Donald Trump-like craziness. James Donald Bowman. James Donald Bowman. That is truly strange. Before finally landing on J.D. Vance. I'm not sure what the J.D. actually stands for, but if I have to pick, I'm going with James Donald. Instead of Donald John, this is James Donald, or perhaps John Donald. John Donald Vance, since all he's giving us are initials. Anyway, his intro to the American public has been stunningly bad. Remarkably bad. So bad that it's got Trump lost trying to find a nickname, something to stick to Kamala Harris, as he cannot find a way to swing all the attention back in his direction, which probably wouldn't be good for him at this point anyway, as J.D. Vance is out there embracing parts of Project 2025. We'll get to that in a moment. He's made one strange public remark after another, suggesting childless adults pay higher taxes. Now, I've heard childless adults like myself claim we actually shouldn't have to pay as much in taxes because we don't really care about schools. We don't have any children, so why would it matter to us? We don't care about new and improved or safer school buses because we don't have any children getting on those buses and we have no intentions of getting on them ourselves. We don't need to pay for playgrounds. We don't need to pay for Head Start programs. We don't need to pay for all of those things because it's not us. It's not we, the childless cat ladies of America, who are costing America so much extra money by having children. But they're also ensuring that America has a future. I think it's lovely when a young couple comes together and has the right responsibility, has the financial ability to truly support a child and to decide to have a family. I think it's incredibly tragic when they do it completely all out of order before they have secured long-term employment and things that would ensure that they are going to be able to raise a child without too much hardship. Everyone faces some hardship, rich or poor. But responsible rearing of children is something that I admire. I just don't think I should have to pay extra because I don't have any. In fact, perhaps in a fairer world, I would pay a little less. As J.D. Vance continued his attack against Americans who have yet to have children or made a conscious decision not to have children, he went on to name some unhappy, childless cat ladies who run the Democratic Party and therefore run the country because, of course, all the puppet masters in America are Democrats, liberal Democrats at that. Vance then went on to cite Vice President Kamala Harris and then almost immediately Mayor Pete Buttigieg as an example. Pete, you still got a penis? You still identify as male? Yeah, okay. See, JD, Mayor Pete is a man. Yes, he's a gay man. But don't even go down that rabbit hole. Don't even begin to consider thinking about going down that rabbit hole. J.D. Vance is a man. He's as much a man as you. He served in the Marine Corps too. He went to Harvard, not Ohio State. I'm not sure where he went to law school or got his MBA, but it was likely Harvard or Yale as well. And he didn't do it while, pretentiously carrying on as if he were some sort of a hillbilly whose grandmother raised him in the suburbs of Cincinnati, not anywhere near moonshine country down here in southern Appalachia, not at the very, very corner of Appalachia that barely brushes up against Ohio. Pete Buttigieg is in fact a man. And he's a man with 2 children. Adopted, yes, but he has twins with his husband, Chasten. So J.D. Vance just keeps getting weirder. As Vance was also caught searching for videos of women having relations with dolphins. I don't even know what to say about this one. Weirdo? Right. Okay. Trump is in dismay over new polls and his disastrous running mate. Trump promising, quote, his Christians, not Jesus' Christians, they are his Christians, that if they just get out and vote this time, that if they just get out and vote this time, they'll never have to vote again. I have never heard anyone say something so obvious, fascistic, and dictatorial. What Trump is saying that I will rig the system so heavily that you'll never have to go and vote again. I will make sure that a theocracy is imposed on everybody in America except for rich people like me, because God knows I've lost count of how many abortions I've paid for. Of course, I'm speaking as Donald Trump at the current moment. We all know Donald Trump has more than likely paid for more than one abortion. He's probably paid for, again, a number he's lost count of which he's lost count. It's disgusting to see this separation, not only of wealth in this country and the amount of wealth held on to by 3 people who own as much wealth as half of the American population. It's absolutely unsustainable. It's absolutely unsustainable. The concentration of wealth among the top 100 people in the United States would completely crush the rest of the 330 million people in the United States. But from one sour note to one positive note, we have new polls. And Fox News did these polls. So just add 2 points to everything you hear about Kamala Harris. In Michigan, an all-blue state, a state that has gone completely Democratic and likely will not go back. Sorry, Kid Rock, you'll have to go back to, well, rock. And I don't mean music. And Ted Nugent, go back to living in the woods, playing with bows and arrows. Harris 49, Trump 49. So that means in the real world, that's Harris 54, Trump 46. Minnesota, Harris 52, Trump 46. Pennsylvania, another blue state that will likely go 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 points to the Democratic nominee. In this case, Kamala Harris. Pennsylvania, 49-49. And Wisconsin, Kamala's losing by 1 point inside the margin of error, 49-50. But let's remember, this is the same state that just elected Judge Janet Protasewicz by 12 percentage points. The polls were only off by between, 15 and 17 points for that particular race. That was the race for the Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court. That's the direction Wisconsin is trending. They're not trending harder to the right. They're not tacking to the right. The entire Midwest is pulling to the left, not to the right. They're not getting right. Well, we want more Scott Walker. We want more union busting. We want lower wages. We want less health care. They want more of those things. And now that they've, experienced it, now that they've had Tony Evers as governor, now that Michigan's had Gretchen Whitmer, now that the entire state assembly has completely gone Democratic in Michigan, now that Pennsylvania has one of the shining stars of the Democratic Party as its governor, a man who has overperformed in almost everything that has gone wrong in his state, they're not going back. They're not going back. And I will likely be a Pennsylvania resident this time next year. Stay tuned for more updates on that, as we will have a little discussion about my personal dilemma at the end of this show, because there's nothing I like talking about more than me. Okay, let's just talk about popularity and enthusiasm. Among all adults, Harris, 48, Trump, 39. Among Democrats, Harris, 88%, Trump, 6%. The most striking result in this poll, Harris's enthusiasm and popularity among Republicans is 12%. Trump gets 82. She gets double the number of enthusiastic Republicans than Trump gets enthusiastic Democrats. If this number holds up, if this type of number holds up throughout the election, she is likely to win by a landslide. Because we know that about 20 to 25% of Republicans want nothing to do with Donald Trump. They'll write in Nikki Haley, or they'll write in some other wacko. They'll write in Chris Christie. They'll write in, or they'll vote for Kamala Harris. Because after all, she was a member of law enforcement. She was the top cop in the state of California. Before that, she was a prosecutor who works hand in hand to build cases against bad guys and bad gals with the police. So you're getting a pro-police candidate as well. And then among independents, Harris, 49, Trump, 31. Well, that can't be good. If you're Donald Trump looking at that, trying to figure out how to draw the momentum back your way without saying something absolutely ridiculous and nasty, which I'm sure he's on the cusp of doing. It's like any moment now we know that something nasty, something awful is going to come out of his mouth, if nothing else, than to just, preserve the attention he might get. the attention he'd get for a few days would be worth going out there and dropping, some incredibly racist bomb. Like we have the Fox News, or rather Fox Business News. So you've been demoted, guy. You've already been demoted once. Then you call the Vice President of the United States, when I'm not going to repeat it on here, because what he said was so incendiary and nasty and pointed directly toward women across the country. But I am going to insert a little clip of just how weird J.D. Vance is in some coverage from MSNBC earlier this week.
Is reporting on about another 2021 remark Vance made where he argued for higher tax rates on childless Americans. He says, quote, "So you talk about tax policy, let's tax the things that are bad and not tax the things that are good. If you're making $100,000, $400,000 a year, you've got 3 kids, you should pay a different, lower tax rate than if you're making the same amount of money and you don't have any kids. It's that simple." Of course, the child tax credit already exists, but just the way he talks about it, bad if you don't have kids, good if you do have kids. Do you think Trump's regretting
that particular pick? Do you think it's possible? Oh, JD, how was that? As he's being called out now at every turn. The doom loop that Democrats were in just 2 weeks ago has now become a doom loop for Republicans, because they're running a man who smears himself with makeup to cover up his blemished, tarnished, rotting skin. He has never shown us a true health report. We know he's got to be on blood thinners to bleed that much from a nick to the ear. Imagine it if you went to get your ear pierced and that much blood came out. That's just a good example. Or think about the Evander Holyfield-Mike Tyson fight. There wasn't that much blood in the ring when Mike Tyson bit half his ear off. So we know Trump was nicked by something because the FBI is investigating it. And by the way, Trump wants Christopher Wray, a man he appointed director of the FBI, arrested and prosecuted for not just saying that Trump was hit with a bullet, but instead saying, it could have been debris. I mean, debris did, after all, hit 4 officers from the Pittsburgh area who were there providing extra security, trying to work hand in hand with both Butler Police and with the Secret Service. So we know he's an absolute lunatic who has no problem attacking people he appointed. After all, he tried to get Mike Pence hung. Imagine what he would try to do to J.D. Vance. Maybe he put J.D. Vance in the water with either the option to be electrocuted or eaten by sharks, which actually don't eat people. They might bite, and that could cause a lost limb, that could cause a person to bleed to death, but apparently we taste like stink bugs to sharks. So we don't necessarily see human beings being eaten up by sharks. We see people who have shark bites, but not people who were eaten by sharks. They are not alligators or crocodiles. They are sharks that live out at sea. So let's just keep that in mind as we continue to wander down the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland. That's where we seem to be. Now, to change topics for a moment, to try to add a little culture to this otherwise disgraceful conversation that I've been having with you for the past 30 minutes. The film of the week, last time I did one of these podcasts, was Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I love the film. It sort of goes in the old Hollywood film noir vein. There are just too many wild circumstances for the film to be anywhere near realistic, but Val Kilmer, I think, was on his A game. I think it was the big comeback that Robert Downey Jr. needed in order to rejuvenate his career and get back in the A-list of A-lists. where he truly belongs. I mean, he is a fine actor. He can be funny and goofy and serious. He can be, a comic book character, which apparently he's going to be again. I don't completely get that. But I guess it pays extremely well because he did, pull up in his Maybach and protest alongside the SAG-AFTRA union members who were out there trying to make sure they continue to get paid. And he'll be just fine either way. So, enjoy the hot weather. That was essentially the message from Robert Downey Jr. I'm a big Robert Downey Jr. fan, and I'm just kidding. I think Kiss Kiss Bang Bang was a fantastic film. And instead of really discussing it, we have already done one Wes Anderson film. And in the future, we will do another medium budget film by one of the best directors in America today, Paul Thomas Anderson. There Will Be Blood. That's going to be movie after this one. The film tonight, Moonrise Kingdom. Wes Anderson, I believe it came out in 2012, 2013. It's about a childhood romance, sort of a pubescent romance, if you will. It is a darling of a film, and it really shows the eccentricities and quirkiness of Wes Anderson, which each of his films do. Each of his films have that same quirkiness. And actually, we'll throw two out there because I can talk about both of them. We can have a discussion about both of them. But we don't want to do Wes Anderson for every one of these. So it can be A, The French Dispatch, which was absolutely fantastic, starring Bill Murray, starring Owen Wilson. Frances McDormand, going through the list of stars who happen to show up in Wes Anderson films when we know, at least according to Ed Norton, they're only making about $4,500 a film. It's not worth their gas to get there for the amount of money Tilda Swinton would otherwise be paid. However, they are some of the finest films made in the United States today. And this time around, we're going with Moonrise Kingdom / The French Dispatch. So, bear with me. We'll talk about it next time. We'll break down the films the way we sort of briefly talked about Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is one of those, a lowly criminal goes on a job with a guy who ends up getting shot because he trips an alarm inside a toy store in New York City around Christmas time. Gets shot by an old lady on a fire escape. Then he ends up running into what turns out to be an audition that's happening late at night after all the stores closed, just a couple of days before Christmas, that's being hosted by producer Larry Miller, a great comic and a truly great actor who really has been underappreciated in his time, but was great in this. Ends up getting him sent out to Los Angeles, where he meets his high school dream girl, played by Michelle Monaghan, and he's guided by a character known as Gay Perry. When asked if he's still gay, no, I'm knee-deep in pussy over here. It's just the name I like. Fantastic role played by Val Kilmer. And again, Larry Miller was awesome in the film. So we can discuss that a little bit more on Instagram. We'll get a conversation going about it, and maybe we'll get some people involved. I want to keep this thing going, but I don't know that I have the skills to keep it going. I have the best software, the best computer I could buy, the best microphones money could buy me. I've bought what I could, but there are things that I lack. So I am leaving Knoxville, Tennessee, likely enrolling at a small college, studying technology, production, mostly communications. These days it's communications. Probably in the city of Pittsburgh, as a subjective reporter for whatever. It also draws me to New York in many ways because the opportunities for internships, even for an old man like me, are aplenty. Again, not paid gigs, just internships where I can go learn, type, improve my technological skills, as I have literally none. I suppose I could teach myself about my editing software, but it seems that having some guidance there would also be worthwhile, as again, it wouldn't hurt to have my computer skills touched up, as I took using information technology in college in 2003 when we were still using floppies. The small ones, not the big ones like from the early 90s and late 80s, but still, you get what I'm trying to say. So as I sign off today, I'll say this. I will be back. We will continue to do this because while I have the equipment and the subscriptions, why not? But unless we really begin to improve, unless things really begin to turn around for us, I'm going to have to close up shop at some point. I'm going to have to pause what has been the Magnolia Media Podcast for Scruffy City, USA, Knoxville, Tennessee, a southern view on progressive politics, and instead move toward something else. Move toward a career that can sustain me for the rest of my life, and one that eventually leads to Manhattan. Because while I love the city of Pittsburgh, we had a great St. Patrick's Day there, we had a great Christmas there, we had a great year there, period, going back and forth. It's also only about a 7.5 hour drive from my hometown of Knoxville, Tennessee. It's also sort of like a miniature Manhattan. But it's not Manhattan. It's not New York. With it does not come this warm feeling of embrace as if I finally made it home after 40 years of searching. But $4,000 a month, at least $40,000 a year going toward rent for a single man. A single man who has yet to nail down the qualifications necessary to get a job that will ensure my place in journalism, in reporting, in podcasting, in radio, and whatever might be out there. So please, if you know of such a path, you have recommendations for me, hit me up on Instagram at Magnolia John 2024. Same thing on Threads. Send me a DM. Let me know. Maybe there's something out there I'm not seeing. Maybe there's something I just don't know. I have had a successful sales career, although I spent several years caring for a sick loved one and 2 more years battling through a civil proceeding that could have left me completely penniless. But I was able to come through it and come to some respectable conclusion. So with that being said, thank you all for tuning in to the Magnolia Media Podcast. Again, if you want to help the podcast, check us out on Patreon at Magnolia Media Network. Patreon.com/Magnolia Media Network. It's $5. It's $5. At any rate, have a wonderful day, and until next time, this is Jonathan M. Ruggiero from the Magnolia Media Podcast, saying to you, till next time, be well.